Hello there, and welcome to an interview we are doing with Steve Moore, Strategic Counsel to the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry, and Tom Risby, Research Associate. This interview is about the Hodges Review, which is a new wide-ranging commission to assess regulation and public policy relating to the UK's legal cannabis industry. Now, I wonder, Steve, if you could give us just a brief outline of what the Hodges Review is and what you're trying to do with it.
Right. The Hodges Review is the first time that there has been an attempt to review how the government and the regulatory agencies engage with the legal cannabis industry, both medicinal and the consumer products, over-the-counter products. I mean, these two categories of products only emerged in the scene over the last few years. Medical cannabis was legalized for the first time in 2018, and the consumer cannabinoid process of regulation only started in 2020. So there's essentially they're relatively new industries, and they have grown over the course of the last couple of years. But there does seem to be no real strategic coordination of the sector across government. There's no real stewardship of the sector across government. Most of the public policy in this space is very reactive. It's basically reactive to campaigning and lobbying. This industry was not designed, there was no blueprint for it inside Whitehall. So consequently, it's kind of shunted between various departments. Regulation is dispersed across numerous agencies. There isn't, what Chris Hodges himself says, a landing zone for this sector within the UK's life sciences strategy or anywhere else in a sense. So I think what we tried to do with this report was say, Britain has had some success in this area. We've created the most successful medical cannabis company in the world in GW Pharmaceuticals. We've become the first jurisdiction in the world to actually approve the fast-growing consumer cannabinoid category using a European Commission device, which most European members companies have yet to deploy. So I think there are ways in which we can exploit that commercial advantage, but it can't be done unless there's a policy of embracing the sector and beginning to nurture it, rather than what I would describe as a containing strategy at the moment, which is mainly a product of reacting to events. So this is the first attempt to do that. It's a wide-ranging study. It will engage all the key stakeholders who are impacted by or involved in this sector, and it will report in May.
Fantastic. You mentioned the regulatory, what's going on with regulatory in terms of the cannabis industry at the moment. I wonder if you could give us a bit of a background into the regulatory environment as it stands at the moment.
Yes, I mean, a lot of the regulation mainly starts in terms of the Home Office because of the nature of the products we're talking about. So there's a lot of responsibility the rest currently with the Home Office, including, for example, issuing of medical cannabis licenses. So you have this slightly weird situation where our effective Homeland Security Department is responsible for making decisions about medical licensing and things like that, which throws up all sorts of challenges. Those were identified in last year's task force on innovation and regulatory reform that was presented to the Prime Minister in June last year, where the fact that the Home Office was taking these responsibilities rather than the Department of Health seemed to be slightly odd. So I think there is a kind of, and then there's further regulations across, obviously with MHRA, the FSA, and so on. There's been a long-standing issue about how to regulate nutraceuticals, which has been part of an ongoing debate in the UK and the wider world over the last 20 years. And so I think this is an opportunity to kind of think about what is the smartest way of regulating this industry so that it benefits the companies who are operating in the United Kingdom and ultimately benefits consumers and patients.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clearly needed, and there are clearly some obstacles within the industry. What you're discussing about where it's actually regulated is obviously a big concern in the industry. But what do you see are the main obstacles the main barriers that are currently preventing the cannabinoid sector to achieving its full potential?
I think the fact that we don't have a formal footprint in Whitehall, what we don't have is a minister who's directly got a vested interest in helping to grow the sector. There's virtually no kind of recognition of the sector, as I said earlier, in the life sciences, where we are investing huge, we're increasing the amount of investment in life sciences. We have a competitive advantage in life sciences, as was demonstrated through the pandemic in terms of development of vaccines and things like that. So we are a country which has a prowess in terms of R&D, innovation in life sciences and biotech and pharma. And I think really, in a sense, what we're saying is, does the country that's created this, has sporadically had some success in this space, want to create a coherent, intelligent strategy to help grow and nurture this industry, rather than kind of leaving it sort of as a poor relation of other branches of the life sciences sector. And I think the evidence is that we have got the capability and the opportunity to do that. It's hard to identify a country at the moment that has a marked competitive advantage in cannabinoid R&D and innovation. That's pretty much uncontested space at the moment. It's one that we would argue through Hodges that we should occupy.
So linking up the capability with the opportunity, with the potential. Absolutely. Yeah. You do mention that getting support in Whitehall will be a challenge, and you are collaborating on this paper with Professor Chris Hodges. I'd love to hear a bit more about who he is and why in particular you've chosen to work with him.
Yeah, so I think what we were able to do, I mean, Tom in a second will say a little bit more of what's distinctive about Chris and why he's a growing influence in Whitehall, particularly in regard to the future of regulation post-Brexit. But I think what we were able to do over the course of the last few months was reach out across across all the key government departments and agencies that in some way impinge on cannabis and have some influence over the growth and development of this sector, to establish where they were at the moment. And what was very obvious was two things. One was that there was no coordination across any of these departments at all. There's no feeling at all that the Home Office was in a dialogue with the Department of Health about the nature of licenses that were issued, whether they were commercial licenses or research licenses. And there was no sense of, I keep coming back to the word, sense of stewardship. There's no sense of like, let's provide some husbandry for this sector, let's recognize those successes. There's still this kind of slightly kind of nervousness and trepidation when talking about cannabis. One of the senior officials in the Department of Health said to me, you know, that Sir Professor Robin Murray's studies over the last 20 years into the link between cannabis and psychosis still shrouds all conversations about public policy in this area. So I think there is a feeling that people engage with this in a kind of nervous, trepidatious way. And I think so I had a series of meetings at Number 10 earlier in the year to sort of give us feedback, to draw attention to the TIGA recommendations. And that was the path that led me to Chris. So Chris, it seemed to me, was becoming a very interesting and innovative thinker in this space. And he was becoming, we engaged with him over the last couple of months to see if this was an area of interest for him. And I think one of the things that the TIGA report highlighted was that there was a willingness of government to look at new forms of regulation within the context of new sectors. And I think we identified this as this is a sector that could benefit from this kind of attention. And that's kind of how we moved it forward.
Fantastic. And did you have anything to add to that, Tom?
Yeah. Chris's regulatory approach is innovative, and it's brand new. There's this traditional conception that regulation is a barrier. It should be preventative for businesses from doing anything that they want to be doing. OBCR, which is what Chris is pushing forward, is outcome-based cooperative regulation. It's all about helping businesses achieve what they can. It's all about trust. There's a dialogue there. It's all about driving communication between stakeholders and the government. So they have this constant data stream. They show and give evidence for what they're doing, how they're maintaining their really high standards. And by doing that, they can gain trust, and then the regulator can give them space and time. It doesn't have to be nannying them over things. On an industry-wide level, the industry comes up with goals and objectives that they can all look to, and then as an industry work to achieving those goals. So it's about, rather than businesses thinking, I want to increase my sector of the pie, it's about increasing the size of the pie as a whole.
Really interesting. So much more of a sort of collaborative approach to regulation there.
Exactly.
Really, yeah. Well, really looking forward to hearing about the objectives of the report. What do you hope to achieve in the sort of short and long term?
I think there's three our goals are really, threefold. One is to create a landing zone for the sector. What we want is some recognition the sector exists, that is potentially a buoyant and productive and innovative sector that needs some nurturing. Second is to get some coordination across Whitehall in terms of how we engage with this. Make sure that organisations who have an impact on the development and growth of the sector are basically operating in a coherent and intelligent way in terms of their engagement with the sector, and the public policy that emerges reflects that. And then thirdly, I think really benefiting from the huge amounts of investment that the UK is making in life sciences and more broadly in R&D as well. At the moment, I don't think that those benefits would necessarily accrue to the cannabinoid sector as it stands at the moment. And I think the sector is growing fast. There's a potential to become a world leader in innovation and R&D in this space, and I think this, by basically being able to create this kind of footprint in Whitehall, some recognition of its potential, getting public policy more coordinated, we should be able to benefit from some of that investment, and basically to be able to create a kind of a global centre for excellence in the space.
Absolutely, and no reason why the UK couldn't be a global leader.
Nobody else doing it at the moment. I mean, I think other countries have been more advanced in terms of liberalisation of cannabis policy, notably Canada, and other countries have been, like Portugal, experimenting with decriminalisation. But what no one has done up to now is really make the significant investment in R&D that's required. And I think that the process of approving consumer products and establishing their safety profile in the course of next year will be a huge boon in terms of investment and innovation. But I also think that we've had the recommendations of NICE regarding the efficacy and cost effectiveness of cannabis-based medical products, and it's pretty clear there's a massive need in terms of investment in research in that space as well. If we're going to develop the kind of our clinical understanding of the therapeutic values of cannabis. So I think all of that stuff, it seems to me, there's no reason why the UK could basically accomplish that and basically become the leader. And I think also because, in some ways, because the debate about adult use, recreational use of cannabis is off the radar for now, because both main parties are not supporting it going into the next election. Now, it does give us that sort of space to focus in on the medicinal and the kind of the wellness market, which is, I think, the UK already has the second largest wellness market for cannabinoid products in the world. And that's only going to grow post-regulation.
Absolutely. There's a lot of appetite, it seems to be, out there amongst UK citizens to access these products.
Yeah, people are really experimenting. I mean, people are experimenting a lot in this. There's a lot of demand, obviously, for medicine as well, which is to some extent contained because of the size of the black market and the fact that people have access to the private sector. But it's obvious from the growth of the consumer market over recent years and how retailers embrace that and how consumers embrace that. And our recent work with Kantar demonstrates that market held up really rather well over the pandemic years. And in fact, among younger people, started to grow significantly. So I think the outcome of the deliberations of the food safety, food standards agency will be very important in terms of restoring consumer confidence. Some of our evidence suggests that we're up to half the people who would consume these kind of products haven't up to now because they're not confident regarding the provenance or their safety. And I think the sort of reassurances that come from that process will only help the market grow and also be a boon to innovation.
Absolutely. It's notable that the UK is the second largest consumer cannabinoid market in the world, and yet it could still double in size if we have an appropriate regulatory environment for it.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we are the first country in the world that actually gripped that issue. A lot of that was down to the work of the ACI over the 2019-2020 period, when we basically done a lot of research into that area and put forward some very concrete ideas of how it could be regulated. So I think it's so we've been in this since the outset, you know, and have been very influential in shaping the sector, both in terms of medicine and over-the-counter products. So I think this is a natural progression for us going forward, is to basically to establish that kind of foothold in Whitehall and to have more people sitting inside SW1 who've a vested interest in the sector growing.
Absolutely. Well, it's clear you've done some real strategic thinking around how to move the cannabinoid sector forward. If I can just get you to take your head out of all the ins and outs of the report, compiling that at the moment, and think about the cannabinoid sector in the UK, say 10 years down the line, what would your hopes be for the sector?
I think what our hopes for the sector would be that basically what we had, I think threefold really. One is that Britain had an advantage and has established a world-leading role in terms of R&D in this space. As I said, that's uncontested space at the moment. I think we've got the strength of our university sector, the strength of our life sciences sector does create the kind of the environment where that kind of as a realistic goal. I think secondly is to see much more clear good clinical studies with more good evidence of the therapeutic value of cannabis, and thirdly to see a massive boon in terms of innovation akin to what's happened in omega-3 with CBD, so CBD and other minor cannabinoids. So I think there is a lot of opportunities to do it in that space. And again, I don't think we're only basically at the start of the innovation journey. And I think that the investment that will be unleashed when the FSA complete its regulation should be a huge boon to innovation in that space. And I think there's a long way to go. So I think we should be building and developing a buoyant consumer sector. We should be building a much more clinical understanding of how cannabis operates and works therapeutically, and we should be building an infrastructure that can support those goals.
Absolutely, yes. Tom, would you like to add anything to that?
No, just see more people knowing about cannabinoids and the benefits that they can do. There's so many people out there right now that don't know what CBD is or don't know the benefits that they can derive from it. And even when they do know about it, they don't know all the information, or there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So just spreading the word and getting more people understanding the health benefits of these substances.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly going to be a very exciting year for the industry. I think we can all agree. I think it's going to be really interesting to see this new approach to regulation, to see the report coming out. Could you just give us an idea of when you're expecting the report to come out?
So we expect the report to be published at the end of May. Yeah. There's a process of consultation which will evolve over the course of the next 2 months, but we expect to produce the report within 2 months.
Excellent. And then what are your hopes from there? You'll have the report.
So that's what we'll expect. We would like to get ministerial responses to this before the summer recess.
Fantastic. All right. Alongside the FSA's novel food process being
yes. And during that process, we hope that the novel foods, that the FSA can produce the updated, much long-awaited, much heralded public list.
Indeed. Well, it's certainly going to be a very interesting spring for the whole of the cannabinoid industry. And yeah, I do hope that we see some really positive outcomes from this result. And as a result, the UK cannabinoid industry can become a bit more collaborative, a bit more cooperative, and really support all of those, 52% of people who would feel more comfortable consuming cannabinoids in a more regulated environment. So yeah, the future is bright. So that leads to the end of the interview. I've been Leila Simpson, as Innovation Director for the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry, and I've been joined today by Steve Moore, Strategic Counsel to the ACI, Association for the Cannabinoid Industry, and Tom Risby, Research Associate for the ACI. Thank you both very much, and I'm looking forward to catching you again once the report.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you. Bye-bye.